welcome to this talk and walk on Constable today in this glorious weather. We're going to stop off at many of the points of interest in Constable's life, such as this studio here. He was known to have rented this studio from about 1802, but was frequently in the studio up until 1816 when he got married to Maria Bicknell. So he would have finished and executed lots of his works here, probably after drawing out in the countryside. There are over 400 works of art attributed to Constable. We're going to look at a selection today, and I'm going to show you those on board so you can see roughly where he might have stood to paint them. Just a little note about Constable, really. He was a radical. He was, you know, looking back, people think he was this romantic, idealised artist, but actually he was a radical. He broke away from tradition. He painted in vibrant colours that weren't very popular at the time. Today, I hope I'll just give you a good snapshot of Constable's life, and hopefully you'll leave with some new understanding about what he did. He was born here in 1776. His parents, Golding and Anne, bought the plot of land with the profits that Golding was making through Flatford Mill and Dedham Mill, and he built a 3-storey red brick mansion. And sometimes I look at that one and I think, I wonder if it kind of looked a bit like that one. This is a sketch. So at each stop, I'm going to hand round or show you a sketch by Constable. So this is a sketch that he did of his family home. And so you can see it's quite a majestic, tall building, and there were lots of cellars and attic space and 37 acres of land and really beautiful gardens. And Constable painted the house, painted views from the house, painted the gardens. The gardens in particular, he painted in 1815 in memory of his mother, who was a passionate gardener, and beautiful gardens. They're at the moment in Christchurch Mansion in Ipswich. 2 really, really stunning paintings. Never sold in his lifetime, but really an honour to his mother, who died in 1815. So this one I won't hold round or hand round because I think you can probably see it clearly enough. But if anyone wants to have a closer look, then you can. I wanted you to stand in this particular place. I'm going to hand this one round so you can actually see with your own eyes the view of East Bergholt Porch. Constable was so much more than just a finished artist. He was a sketcher in oils, in pencil, you know, and I really wanted to bring that across as much as anything. So this is a sketch, and he painted this church many, many times, but you know, some of them are sketches, some of them are finished paintings. This is thought to have been done in evening light. He painted it in morning light. You know, he was very interested in light and tried to capture light in the weather and in the clouds and on buildings. So light is a big theme that runs through his paintings. This church is very important to the Constables, or was very important to them. They had their own pew, and Golding Constable was a church warden for 10 years. And so it was an important place of worship for them, you know, really featured heavily in John Constable's life from childhood. And it's also likely to be where he first met his wife. We don't know for sure, but it could well be, because her grandfather, Reverend Rudd, was the Reverend here. And so Maria Bicknell was 12 when she first met John Constable, who was 12 years older, so 24. Obviously nothing happened then, but they knew of each other. And then many, many years later, they struck up a friendship when she was 21 and he was 33, and that's when they began a courtship. Now, Reverend Rudd was very anti their relationship because John Constable was not seen as a decent suitor, because he was just a poor artist, and what could he give his granddaughter? However, John Constable's mother, Anne Constable, was a bit of a social climber, so she was like, oh yes, I like this idea. Yes, you must get together with Maria and marry each other. But unfortunately, it wasn't that simple. They had a 7-year courtship, during which time Maria got fed up on several occasions that things were taking so long, and why couldn't they just get married? They had to see each other in secret. So some of the route we're walking today is where they would have walked when her grandfather wasn't stopping her from seeing him. They were even prevented from writing to each other at one point. So it was a really difficult, drawn out 7 years. So when they finally did get married, they did it very quietly in London. They didn't marry here, and they had 7 children. Sadly, she died aged 41, so their beautiful love story ended very prematurely. She died at 41, leaving behind 7 children under the age of 11. So John Constable went into 9 years of mourning. He never got over it, and he died 9 years later. So it's a really sad story, but they were really, really in love. And so when we see this, I think it's nice to think that, you know, they walked around here together, very deeply in love with each other. So we've got 3 images here, which I am going to show around. This one is the earliest one. Now, what we're looking at is Fen Lane, the start of Fen Lane, and Fen Lane is going to take us quite a long way. This is the way he walked to school. So the bit you've come down and the bit we're going to go on all the way to Dedham is the way that he would have walked to school, which is lovely. I absolutely love walking this way, and just thinking of this little lad of 10, 11, 12, he would have walked down here every single day, come rain or shine or sleet or whatever. And, you know, it's quite a long walk for a young person. I mean, we're doing it today, but that's a long walk to school. So this one is 1810. I'm going to pass that round. And he did many, many sketches of Fen Lane because it really resonated with him, not just because it was his way to school, but his head teacher at the school in Dedham, at Dedham Grammar, was really enthusiastic about the countryside and really instilled that love of the local countryside in him. But also, like I said, this is some of the way he would have walked with Maria during their courtship. So really, this holds a lot of meaning in his paintings. This is a drawing, so I'll hand this one around this way. In his drawings, he tends to use quite soft pencil and, you know, smudge it around. There's no fine lines and straightness. It's all just quite, you know, he would have used a very soft B pencil of some kind, you know, 6B maybe or something like that. But that one is slightly later, so 1817, as is this one. Now this one is particularly important because it's actually thought to be the very last painting he did on site in Suffolk. His first child was due at the end of this year, 1817, and that summer, 1817, he was prolific. He just sketched and painted every day for hours every day, and it's thought he did that because he knew his first child was on the way and this was it. Life was going to change, and it sure did with 7. Before he went to Dedham Grammar, he was at a boarding school in Lavenham, and he hated it. And he wrote home all the time saying that he was getting unwarranted beatings. And so his parents, thankfully, pulled him out, and that's why he ended up at Dedham Grammar. So he then obviously had the small price to pay, if you like, of walking every day. I don't know, I often think, was he on time to school every day, or did he sort of loiter in the fields and take his time? That's what we can't know. It's those kind of questions I'd love to know. He really liked an artist called Claude Lorrain, and Lorrain made up these kind of quite fabulous, over-exaggerated landscapes and often placed a piece of architecture where it wasn't. And Constable is known to have done that too. So even though Constable was very true to the landscape and very passionate about painting what was there and using green paint, which didn't happen until Constable, it was mostly kind of brown tones. Even so, you know, he did sometimes pop in, especially Dedham Church, where it wasn't technically topographically correct. So in these ones, we can see that. And the reason he went to the RA at 23 is because his father wanted him to go into the business. So at 16, when he left school, he went into the business and had to learn how the mill operated and, you know, look to the weather to act as a guide for whatever it does to the mill. And then it wasn't until Abraham, his youngest brother, was old enough to go into the business that John Constable's father finally relented and said, OK, you can go to art college. By the way, you'll find that a lot of people are called John in this story because John Dunthorne's son, John, or Johnny, then became John Constable's studio hand many years later. So there will be some other Johns you'll meet as well. Cornfield. Have we all heard of the Cornfield? One of Constable's most famous paintings. He did start studying it in 1817, so he did many studies of this route. Now, I've nicknamed this in my head Cornfield Corner here. It's not a field of corn. Corn was used as a kind of generic term for any kind of grain. And what is particularly lovely about the cornfield is that he painted a little boy taking a drink from a stream. And it's thought that that was perhaps a biographical detail, that, you know, he would have done that on his walks to school and back. This stretch is also, as you walk down, just look to your left and you'll sort of see that spring up at some point. I've got it in my head that it's in 2 areas-ish, but, you know, this whole landscape inspired him and influenced him, and he did so many sketches. This one, because it was done in 1826, would have been painted in his studio in London, but would have been based on all the sketches he did around here many years prior to that. So you can't find the exact location where it was painted, but certainly as you walk down there, if you look to the left, you can kind of start to sort of see landscape that looks very like it. The letters that he wrote and Maria wrote to him are often based on his feelings and thoughts down this part of Fen Lane as well. And he said things like, you know, that every paint stroke is reminding him of his love for Maria. But the cornfield wasn't sold in his lifetime, so it's one of many paintings that didn't sell in his lifetime. He only sold about 20 in England in his lifetime. And actually, he was much more popular in France. He was known by Delacroix, the artist Delacroix, as the father of French landscape painting. You know, so in France, he was hugely popular, but in England, sadly, 20 paintings, of which this wasn't one that sold. But this one was the first one that actually ended up in a national gallery. So Wordsworth, the poet Wordsworth, and a bunch of friends fundraised to buy it for the National Gallery. And so it ended up in a national collection thanks to those people. But it's things like that. It's a bit sad, isn't it? He's such a phenomenal painter, but wasn't recognised somehow enough. And this lady, you just asked me, well, why not? You know, but it was because he didn't want to conform to how landscapes were done at the time. He didn't want to make them architectural just because that was the fashion. He didn't want to paint religious scenes because that was the fashion. He didn't want to paint portraits because his father told him to paint portraits because at least then you'll make some money. He wanted to paint what was in his heart. And this place and all the landscape around here was in his heart. So that's what he painted. And sadly, didn't get the recognition at the time, but you know, we can certainly appreciate it now. No, yeah, it's a question I often wonder, how did he survive? But I think his father used to try and bribe him and say, look, if you paint some portraits, I'll buy you a nice little cottage in Dedham. That was one of them. And so I'm sure his father probably helped him out. His father was a wealthy businessman. He made some money. He did make money from some portraits. He didn't not paint portraits. He did have to do portraits to make some money. In Dedham Church, hopefully we'll see one of his 3 religious paintings he painted. That was supposed to be for money, although he wasn't paid in the end. But, you know, but he did get commissions. And then when his dad died in 1816, that's when he inherited quite a lot of money. And Maria also inherited a lot of money when her grandfather died. So, you know, I think from 1816, from when they got married, they were okay. They were well off enough to it was more, I think, when he died and, when she died and he had 7 children to look after. I think that's when money got really tight. The more John Constable drew and painted the landscape and the rivers and the paths and the trees and the hedgerows, the more obsessive he became. And this area in particular, from here to Dedham, was where he was often seen with his friend John Dunthorne, sketching out in the open. This is one of them, and it's a really loose sketch, again with a focus on light, and you know, these are oil sketches he was doing, and although he did pencil as well, oil was very quick, very fluid way of getting colour across the surface. He often had a kind of a peachy, browny undertone, and I think in some of the areas on that one you can see that showing through, and that makes a lovely contrast between the blues and the greens that go on top, if you can still see that ground coming through. I wanted to talk a little bit about his influences. So John Dunthorne, his friend, was obviously an influence and did the whole en plein air painting out in the open, but it was his uncle who introduced him to someone well, his nickname was Antiquity Smith, and he was an art collector and knew a lot about art. And he said to Constable, your drawing needs to improve, look at Gainsborough's work. And so Constable became quite interested in Gainsborough and also wrote in one of his letters, I can see Gainsborough coming at me out of every hedgerow and tree. There's just Gainsborough, he's everywhere. And I think, you know, he really valued Gainsborough as an artist and looked to him to inspire him. But Gainsborough was 50 years or so before Constable and had died before Constable really, before Constable was born, I believe. So they never crossed paths, but Gainsborough was one of his influences. The RA is Royal Academy in London. Actually, I will tell you something about that. So he went at 23, and then to become an academician at the RA, you have to be voted in, or had to be back then. And every year, he not only entered paintings into the Royal Academy exhibition, the summer exhibition, but he also went in for the vote to become an academician. And every year he was declined. For years and years and years, he got 1 vote or 2 votes. So demoralising and disheartening. But he kept going and did eventually become a Royal Academician. But, you know, that man was determined, if nothing else. Finding Constable's exact locations is a real challenge, and it's not possible. I think I've already hinted at that. And these are no exceptions, these two, because when I first looked at these paintings, I thought, oh, they're painted from there across the road and looking up the river. And then I thought, I don't think it is. And it says Dedham Mill and Dedham Lock and Mill. So I thought it can't be there, but it doesn't really look like here either. But, you know, we just have to understand that Constable sketched everywhere, and he put his compositions together in a way that felt right. Now, the first one is a sketch. So again, very loosely painted. What's the year on that? Would you let me know at the top? 1816. Okay, so that was the year that he got married, and again was in East Bergholt and surrounding areas all of that summer in 1816. This one here is a final painting. This got him some recognition. So it was one of the very first paintings that really captured people's interest and attention. And this is a later one, so 1820. I'll hand that round. Obviously that building is not the one in that picture. It was the mill that his father owned, and it was where John Constable did his work at age 16, would have worked here as well on site, would have monitored the water level so the mill could work properly, and the barges came through and all of that. So, you know, you've got to kind of take the image with a pinch of salt and just understand that he sketched probably all around this building here. What I wanted to talk about in this one in particular is the fact that in the sketch, because it's so loose and sketchy, experts have looked at them and they can tell that the way he painted was from the inside out. And that was the way that Claude Lorrain, one of his main influences, that's the way he painted as well. And they look at old artworks with all sorts of special equipment, and they can see how, you know, where that first paintbrush stroke was put and how it developed from there. And I think it's quite clear in the sketch because the middle bit is a bit more detailed than the outer bit. So you can tell that that's where he started and he kind of built out. In this one, we've got Dedham Church. You see Dedham Church in the background? Is Dedham Church in the background? No. So again, topographically incorrect, which often his were, but because he developed them almost with memory and with his sketches from here, many years later, often in his studio in London, you know, why not just pop the church in there, because it would just make the composition. Yeah. It's one of Constable's 3 religious-themed paintings. It's called The Ascension. It was commissioned by his cousin, Edward Alston, and it was commissioned by him to get in the good books of the person who was giving out licenses for pubs, because Edward Alston owned pubs. So he thought, I'll tell you what, I'll do that, and then I'll get the Archbishop to agree the licenses for my pub. Well, the Archbishop said no, and then Edward Alston didn't pay Constable. So, and you'll see the bottom of the painting is very dark, and that's because he just kind of finished it very simply because he wasn't going to get any money from it anyway. So frankly, why would you spend hours and hours doing it any other way? So, but it's, yeah, straight opposite you, slightly look up, and then we're going to head down that way, okay?
This really lovely, very striking building, I love it, is where John Constable came to school. This is the old former grammar school. He was 12 when he came here. His head teacher, Grimwood, who I mentioned earlier, was very encouraging of Constable's creative nature, especially calligraphy and drawing. So he was a really important person in John Constable's life, and I think, like I said earlier, sort of instilled this love of the Suffolk landscape through encouraging him to draw. Yeah. So would you like to do that walk every single day to school? It's a long old walk, isn't it? And I think that's why we know that biographical detail of the boy drinking water is probably so likely, because it was a trek every single day to do this. So in the season, spring was Constable's favourite season, and he wrote about it in his letters. He wrote about how every spring was the best he'd ever seen. He was very enthusiastic about spring, loved all the flowers that were popping up. However, most of the time he wasn't able to be out sketching in the spring. Spring was a really crucial moment in the year where he had to finish up all his paintings to enter into the summer exhibition at the RA, the Royal Academy. So most of his sketching actually happened in the summer and autumn, and then he spent winter and spring, well, winter painting in his studio and spring getting his paintings together. Now here is thought to be the site that was the inspiration for the leaping horse. The leaping horse is on display at Gainsborough's house at the moment. And I was very lucky a few weeks ago when it went up to go into the room when no one was in there, and all the other paintings were all against the floor in their boxes, but the leaping horse had just been hung. And I kind of turned the corner and saw this thing and just went, oh, wow. And it looks so different in real life. It's so much brighter. It's got a lot of white in it. But he wrote to the Archbishop John Fisher at the time, and he said, this is the composition which has created, I'm going to hand it round, created the most anxiety in me out of any other. And, it was one of his big 6-foot paintings. He did 6 of them in his lifetime. He did his 6-foot paintings to catch people's eyes, to catch people's attention, to get into the RA and become known. Unfortunately, this one didn't sell. He really struggled with the composition. He did lots of sketches of the willow tree, just the willow tree itself, and he moved it around. It was much more on the right, and then he moved it to the left so that the horse would be the main feature. And so this was a tough painting for him, because it is really hard, I know from experience, working from sketches into a final piece. Unless you paint it on site, what you're seeing, to come back and create a new composition based on what you did see is really, really challenging. So for a complex composition like that, I'm not surprised he found it so challenging. The horse is jumping, the tow horse is jumping over a barrier that was put in place to keep the cattle from crossing into whichever way it was. In his time, there were tow horses going up and down these pathways all the time. I haven't really mentioned it yet because we're getting to Flatford Mill, where I'll talk more about the horses and the barges. But, this kind of scene would have been something that was quite typical in his time. Horses towing barges up and down the river with goods in them, going from Mistley all the way to London. He also did a 6-foot sketch of this painting. So not only did he do the 6-foot painting, but there is a 6-foot sketch. And he often just, the sketches were just so part of his creation, of his normal creative practice, that he didn't write about the sketches. Those were just kind of what he did. But he wrote extensively about the painting, whereas the sketches are just kind of what he did to prepare for the actual final piece. Constable called himself the man of clouds. He did loads of cloud studies. And you've probably heard of an artist called Alfred Munnings, whose house is in Dedham. I went to that exhibition Monday, I think it was, and there's a whole room dedicated to Munnings's paintings of clouds inspired by Constable, which is really lovely to see. So, it's nice that Constable also had that influence on another local artist very many years later. It's thought that Constable was really inspired by clouds in the sky because of the fact that he had to understand the weather system so much to work at the mill. I really don't know the technicalities of working at mills. I'm sorry, that's my weak point. But the cloud studies, even though that looks like these clouds, they would have been done in Hampstead Heath when he lived in London. He didn't do many studies here. It became much more of a focus in London, but the reason I put it in is because those skies that he painted in Hampstead Heath often appear in the paintings that are based in Suffolk, like the Hay Wain, like, I don't know, the cornfield or whatever. We see those skies that he would have witnessed here, but painted in Hampstead Heath, but put back into Suffolk. So that's why I liked the connection. He had a very little sketchbook, apparently very small, and he used to walk around with it and do a sketch and then turn it over and do another little sketch in a corner and then turn it over again. And he sort of had this system where he would constantly rotate his sketchbook and fold pages. And so often on the back of one drawing, there's another drawing and you have to look at it the other way. And, you know, he was just such a prolific sketcher. And I love that about him. I don't know if anyone here does art, but, you know, you can't beat that feeling of actually being outdoors and sketching. And yeah, I encourage you all to do it. It's good for the soul.
So in the background here, we have Willie Lott's cottage, and the Constables and Lotts moved in different social circles. The Constables were considered a higher ranking than the Lotts. It was said that Willie Lott couldn't read or write, but he was a very good friend to Constable and often took Constable in when Constable was, say, for example, out in the field sketching all day and needed somewhere to rest when he got rained on. There was one story in particular that was told about Constable when he was a boy and he was looking for pigment to go into his painting. So he wanted pig's blood, and he was caught stealing pig's blood from a farm, and his father kicked him out in a rage, and Willie Lott was said to have taken him in on that occasion to give him somewhere to rest for the night. And this cottage, Willie Lott's cottage, is depicted in many different paintings and drawings by Constable, and from every single different angle, from all the way over there to behind it as well. It was a favourite subject matter of Constable's to paint Willie Lott's cottage. The only family connection between the Lotts and the Constables, because they didn't move in the same social circles, was Willie Lott's third sister's daughter married John Constable's cousin, also called John. Okay, so I've brought you two images to look at here. I've brought you the sketch of the Hay Wain and the final piece of the Hay Wain. And the reason being that the sketch is such a loose, immediate response to what he saw here, whereas the final piece is obviously a very refined piece, which he then put into the RA in 1821. It didn't get a buyer, but it eventually went to the Paris art salon, where it won gold. So the Hay Wain is a quintessential British scene, loved all over the world, and one of the most recognisable paintings world over. It was the third of his 6-footers, which he did to try and get his name known, and went into the RA in 1821. After it went into the art salon in Paris, it was Delacroix who actually called Constable, or named Constable, the father of French landscape. So in France, he was very much recognised for being this incredible landscape painter, whereas England took a little bit longer, or Britain took a little bit longer to catch on. He made a couple of very small changes between the sketch and the final piece. So he removed the horse that was in the foreground in the sketch and took that out of the final piece. John Constable painted scene on a navigable river with this scene right here, because he would have set up his easel and painted what was in front of him en plein air. In 1816, it was the year that Constable and Maria were finally permitted to marry after his father died, and he inherited some money and was deemed suitable enough for her. John Constable's father, Golding Constable, owned a fleet of lighters, or small barges, which had flat bottoms, and also a couple of larger Thames barges. And along this river, the barges would flow up and down with the goods going to and from London. This painting, seen on a navigable river, was never sold in Constable's lifetime. It remained in his possession for the whole of his life. The lighters always travelled 2 at a time, the end one being the rudder of the system. Okay, in this painting, we see 3 young men organising the transportation of the barge and the horse over this bridge here. So one of the young men is untying the horse so that the horse can be led across to the other side, while there is a young man on the horse's back who will ride the horse over. And then we have the third young man who is on the second barge, and he is navigating the barges with a long pole. All along the river, on different sides, there were different tax rates according to who owned the lands. They had to jump on and off the horse at many different stages and either cross the horse to the other side of the river or continue on this side, depending on the taxes. This painting was painted on site, en plein air, and never sold in Constable's lifetime, but it is one of his most famous scenes here at Flatford Mill.